Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join our webinar. My name is Jill McNabb, and I manage communications for Scenario. Scenario provides managed data and analytics services to companies to enable businesses of every size to embrace a data-driven culture. Today, our webinar is called A Unified Data Seminar for PE-backed firms and investors. And we have a great panel today, and so I know it's going to be a lively discussion. Today, our panel will be talking about how to unlock revenue opportunities that are based on the effective use of data and analytics. But we all know that time is limited, resources limited, expertise is limited. So, how can you achieve that goal? And so that's what we're going to be speaking with our panelists today about how actionable steps that you can take to unify your data and use your data. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your Zoom panel. I'll try to bring them up throughout the presentation, but we'll try to save some time for questions at the end. Without further ado, let me introduce our great set of panelists. First, I will introduce Brad Wheeler. Brad Wheeler is the SVP of Data and Analytics here at Scenario. He is a proven technology executive with over 20 years of expertise in healthcare, business intelligence, analytics, and software development. Prior to Scenario, Brad held several executive roles at Omnisys, which is a leading provider of technology solutions for the retail pharmacy industry. He also served as VP of Analytics and Outcomes at IBM Watson Health. He is a frequent presenter at Tableau user conferences, and he's a multi-year Tableau Visionary nominee. So thanks to Brad for joining us. Next, we have Andrew Pauling. Andrew is the President and Chief Commercial Officer of Packline USA. Before Packline, Andrew was the Chief Operating Officer and later served as President of Food Story Brands. This role culminated in the carve-out sale of the business's largest brand, Fresh Cravings, to Lakeview Farms and Cat Vest. Prior to joining Food Story, Andrew held leadership roles at Pacifica Foods, spearheading the sale of the business to WinPoint Partners. Andrew is a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and proudly served in the U.S. Army as a field artillery officer. So thank you to Andrew for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And last, we have Alan Gonsenhauser. Alan has 25 years of experience as a chief marketing officer and P&L general manager for global B2B firms in the health tech, software as a service domain, and extensive cross-functional leadership experience in the go-to-market function and finance function. At Forrester and Sirius Decisions, Alan was a CMO executive advisor where he mentored 108 CMOs, helping to improve their marketing performance results and business alignment. Since forming Demand Revenue in 2021, he has supported private equity portfolio companies as a fractional CMO and executive advisor. So welcome to our panelists. We're thrilled to have you here today. We are going to ask the panelists different questions, and they will hop in and provide their answers according to their experience and their expertise. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to do a rapid round for our first question. The first question, what is the biggest or most common misperception about using data to drive decision-making? So why don't we start? We'll start with Alan.
Sure. I think there are, three things. Number one, it's good enough. What you have is good enough to operate on. The second is it's not that big a deal to get it right. And the third is that, once you have accurate data, that people can find it when they need it and they have access to it. And that's often a difficult thing. Information is not power, access to it is. You need to have the right information at the right time to help with decision making when it's needed.
Absolutely.
Awesome. How about Brad?
Yeah, I would say it's a one of the most common things that I run across is just having access to the data will solve our problems. And man, if only we could just get our hands and just get this data together. But that's definitely a major milestone is getting access to that data. But that's just step one of a long and really continuous journey of just constantly massaging that data, bringing it to life, telling stories. And there's always going to be more data to add to that. But just getting the data is just the beginning.
Perfect. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I would actually, I think all great points, and I'd take the actual opposite end of it. As an operator, a lot of times people believe that data is the enemy. That you've run a business on intuition, you've run a business with the limited information you have, and that putting that all together can actually be disruptive. And so you find both ends of the spectrum, and in a business of smaller middle-sized business that's growing, it's imperative that we understand that neither are true and both are true. So there's a lot has to come together to make the data work for you. And a lot of times that's a real, cultural issue that you have to tackle.
Great. So throughout our discussion, we'll try to dispel some of these misperceptions that we just introduced there. So, as people are thinking about the business case for pursuing data and analytics, there's cost, there's time. What is the business case for actually pursuing data and analytics? I'll start with you, Andrew.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the business case is, pretty apparent up front. For me, it's always starts with our customer. I want to use data, I want to use analytics and insights to better understand who we're working with and how we can best support them. Data, of course, is one part of the story. And so I rely on a bunch of small breadcrumbs, and that's a part of that puzzle to tell me the story. And being able to do that, to create that information and understand is job one. I think number two is the reality that it can be a force multiplier. It's something that if used appropriately, it can not just create value for your business to see something, but also make you better, do more with fewer resources in the long run if you apply it the right way.
Great points. Alan, what do you think in terms of the business case for pursuing data and analytics?
Well, first of all, I couldn't agree with Andrew more, and for me, it's all about the customer. But having good data helps with a lot of things. Overall, it helps with intelligent growth and productivity and productive growth. But it also helps each of the functions agree on, what good looks like. So they're all moving in the same direction. One of the issues I see with lots of companies of all sizes is lack of alignment between the go-to-market functions of marketing, sales, product, customer success, and finance. And it's really important to have a common set of benchmarks and data that everybody drives in the same direction to.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's kind of think about the consequences, right? So what are the long-term consequences if companies don't pursue this data approach? So we talked a little bit about why you should do it, but clearly there's some downsides to pursue there too. Alan, why don't we go with you on the consequences of not pursuing it?
It's the opposite. Lack of productivity, lack of alignment. It's, well, I think it should be this. I think it should be that. My gut tells me this. Well, data can dispel some of that, even though there may be some cultural issues, especially with senior level folks that have, operated that way. But, there's nothing like hearing directly from the customer what they're thinking, what they're saying, what their problems are, and really, moving forward in an aligned way. And if you don't have meaningful, accurate, and timely data, it's difficult for organizations to ensure that they're growing productively.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This notion of kind of answering decisions based on your feeling or your gut, when you're looking at that seems kind of a bit of a challenge in terms of kind of overcoming that from a data perspective and a cultural perspective. So how do you overcome these challenges related to data. So let's talk for a minute about what the challenges are and kind of how might you overcome them. Hey, Brad, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the real common things we start off with, as I mentioned, was access to data. So having access to data, especially out of legacy systems, can be a real common problem. Luckily, we have a development team here at Scenario that we can lean upon whenever it's out-of-the-box solutions don't work. We have built a platform that does enable self-service and direct connectivity to over 300 data sources right out of the box, but sometimes you need custom solutions. So overcoming those custom solutions, especially when connecting to legacy data sources, things that are on premises or sitting behind locked firewalls and things like that, figuring out ways to get access to that data is one. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, that's just step one. So then once you have access to that data, there's all sorts of stories in there and oddities that you're going to have to overcome. One that we helped Packline with, and it'd be great to get Andrew's perspective on this, is two examples we can talk about. One is the concept of grouping of customers, so having customer groups. So in a legacy system that didn't have the ability to group customers, being able to roll customers up and group them at a group level. And then another one would be changing item numbers. So you have an item number that was active, and then now it's been retired and replaced by another item number. If you're looking at year-over-year comparisons on that, it could look like you have huge growth in one item number and huge loss in another. But when you stitch those together, it can help tell that story as a cohesive unit. Those are examples of just continuous evolution of the data. And this is something that we work really closely with our customers on. Andrew is one of our top customers here at Scenario, and I'd love to hear his thoughts on some of those.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, for sure. I want to go back to Alan's comment because I think it starts with culture, right? This idea of, I've lived it. You're sitting in a room. It's a culture of anecdotal information where we sit there and we think we understand our business. There's some intuition there. And when you're small, I think that intuition can take you a really, really long way. The more complicated your business gets, the more customers, the more items, you lose a little bit of that touch and feel. And so data becomes that kind of extension of yourself and gives you a more informed intuition. So using that information actually gets you really, really back in touch with your customer in a way you probably couldn't do since your business was much, much smaller. And so when you apply that to what Brad's talking about, obviously this challenge is convincing people within the organization that this is the way forward. And I think getting data integrity is incredibly difficult, regardless of whether you have one system or a multitude. The important thing about the working with the Scenario platform is I didn't have to think about, okay, I can get it from here. I can get it from wherever I want. And then at that point, it comes down to understanding, to his point, what gives a cohesive story. Because when you're growing a business into a culture of informed intuition, you have to provide data that everybody looks at and says, this makes sense, right? Just like anything else, it's a trust but verify kind of situation, where if you put data in front of your teammates and it doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, you instantly lose credibility, right? So the work that I've done with Brad and his team is really about a crawl, walk, run approach to the way we deliver that information back to our team. Is it sound? Is there integrity? Does it tell the right story? And his example, which is really important, is, I've discontinued SKUs, I've created new SKU. They are in fact the same SKU. So there's a big difference between saying we've had this attrition in our business and just saying, there's a unified approach to a single SKU that in my system looks like multiple things. And so being able to deliver that and do it in real time, right? All of a sudden the light bulb goes on for my team to go, wow, this is really interesting. And I can't get to this quickly on my own.
So you mentioned the notion of kind of unifying the data. You kind of know where to go get the data. So the opposite of that, of course, is fragmented data coming from different systems, an HR system, a finance system, marketing data type of system. So one, obviously that can be hard to deal with, going to multiple systems. Alan, maybe talk for a minute about the challenges of fragmented data and how how does that impact the decision making? So maybe you did decide, hey, I'm going to use data, but wait, it's all over in different systems. So what are specific challenges tied to that fragmentation of the data sources?
As companies scale and they have customers, your future financial results are going to be dependent on a couple of things. Number one, net revenue retention of the customers you have and how you grow them, which is your net revenue retention. And number two, customers being so happy with your value proposition and everything you offer that they bring you new ones and they recommend new ones. And that's really tied very closely to your future financial results. If you have, and it's really important to create a remarkable customer journey, and that begins at the prospect level. So when a customer is a prospect and then they become a customer, and how you onboard them, all the functions that are customer facing are really important. The sales function, customer support function, even the finance function, how you do your invoice. So you want to create a remarkable customer journey for your future financial results. And if you have really fragmented data, it's hard to do that because everybody's going in a different direction. So it comes back to alignment around the customer to understand what their needs are, regardless of which function is interfacing. You want to pull all that together so you can create a wonderful customer journey to drive your future financial results. That's what I net it down to. And so many companies don't. That's a real issue with so many companies.
And if I could jump in, I think for me, Alan, it was, it's interesting that we look at different tools to provide different parts of that experience. And without something that can be agnostic, right, to my data, you end up oftentimes picking the wrong tool just to fit where you need it to in terms of getting the information. So, you see these platforms that are everything to everybody. The reality is that not all businesses are created equal, and we all need different things. Being able to select the tool I need, knowing that I'm going to be able to go get that information, right? And I'm going to be able to put it together and make it synergistic with the rest of my data, enables me to pick the best tool that I need for whatever I'm trying to achieve at that point in time.
Yeah,
there's so many thousands and thousands of apps out there that everybody can pick. So, you don't want to go run after shiny objects. You want to have tools that are going to integrate well with each other and support giving your prospects and customers an excellent journey.
Sure.
That makes a lot of sense. So we talked a little bit about, kind of the importance of unifying data and using this data to make informed decisions. Let's talk a little bit about some examples that you've experienced. And so while we go to kind of Andrew, can you share an example of where, you've used unified data and data analytics and how that's impacted your company, how you operate, your results, maybe a little bit about before and then about after in terms of how you've kind of share your story.
Yeah, and I mean, Brad can bring up if you want, Brad.
Yeah, for sure.
Share what I think we'll kind of share like my initial use case, which was joining, becoming a part of Hackline. It was immediately apparent that we have several categories of business that we do with customers, and those different categories we treat them differently. So they all tell a little bit of a different story. And so from my standpoint, when I started working with Scenario, it was about taking that customer story and being able to give me just a really quick dashboard to understanding, and then being able to drill down from there. Like, this is the important thing. I wanted to get to at least 3 levels of why, a customer story was telling me something. And this is how we got there. I think, Brad, maybe you can chime in. There's
yeah, absolutely.
27, 30 iterations that created what you see here. And frankly, we're continuing to evolve. So the way we look at our customer continues to change. But using an example, I wanted a quick way to understand, to pull up a customer when I'm speaking to them, or if I need to do a review, if I need to go see them, and start with, how's their business look year over year? Simple conversation around revenue and around gross profitability. You can see here, we'll use an example. This is a skimmed portion of the dashboard, but
we'll switch it to current year to date here.
There you go. So a good example is, we pulled up a customer here, Synergy Inc. You can see that your current year sales are a little bit down. You can look at your average sales there really quickly, month to month. And so typically what I will do with a customer is look at that as a starting point, understand the trend line, and then dig a little bit deeper and say, okay, well, what's driving maybe us being down a little bit? And you can see here that the electronics, we click and drill down into the electronics, and you can see that the current sales, well, actually, this is up year over year, 20%. You can see that the electronics is actually driving a lot of that growth. And so then you ask the next version of why, and you can see what specific item numbers are outperforming year over year. More importantly, within those item numbers, because not all dollars are created equal, you can look at the margin story behind not just the business, but also the category, and then again at the product level, right? So you can see in this first item that he's hovering over that sales are up, but you can see the profit margin has suffered, right? So if you want to drill down and understand specifically within that item, well, what's going on with my profit margin? You can see that we pull up an additional level of detail. We can click on that item specifically and then say, typically there's going to be a few things that are going to drive your margins, right? We've seen the sales increase, but did my cost change? Did my sales price change? And this tool was great for me to really get granular around like what's driving our growth, what's driving the places where we see margin improvement, and what's driving places where we might see degradations. And that allows me to have really good news conversations with customers. Maybe there's a place where we can support them better and actually reduce their cost or reduce their price. There's places where we look at items and we understand that maybe they are the tail or something that we need to take a hard look at. But ultimately, I know my business. I know that customer in a general level of detail that we can have those conversations pretty immediately. We also created, and I don't know if Brad has it, but I have a customer-centric version of that.
We didn't create a version of that.
That tells them their revenue story without a deeper level of data around our margins.
So Andrea, you kind of, how do you use that? Like in a customer meeting, you would share the customer version of that so
Absolutely.
they can. Okay.
Absolutely. I'll go to a customer and it's really simple with Scenario. You can actually export directly to a PowerPoint. You don't have to take a screenshot. It's all built in. And I can quickly, night before a meeting, I can pull up quickly and say, how are we doing this year? Right. So that we're all under the same impression, because a lot of times my customer doesn't know. They may be buying 400 or 500 products from 75 vendors from me. And so this is and there you go, Brad's doing it on the fly. So this is a great way for me to walk in and say, okay, here's how we're doing together, right? And where do we see the growth coming from? And this creates a really, really nice open dialogue with our customers to say, what should I plan for? It starts to get into the forecasting conversation. It really opens a lot of doors for me. Really, one, to show our customer we understand our relationship together. And then, as I talked about a force multiplier, in the long term, this actually allows me on a more granular position to actually reach out to customers and say, hey, I noticed something's going on here in this category with this item. Can I count on it? What do I not know? And that curiosity with them goes actually a long way because sometimes they might not even know. And it gets them asking the right questions within their own organization.
I love hearing that from your perspective, Andrew. And then I'd love to just take the opportunity just to show off this dashboard just a little bit and just talk about some of the custom things that were built into this. So this started off talking about the evolution, Jill, of before and an after. We started off in a boardroom with Andrew on a hand-drawn piece of paper. I wish I had it here to pull it up to show where it started off, but it was really long form because we were trying to fit a lot of information on the screen. We had this blends 3 different data sources, I believe. And so we're pulling in data from various sources and we're fitting a ton of information on the screen. And what was happening was you had to do a lot of scrolling and wasn't telling the full picture. So would also just the idea of selecting customers. Packline has a lot of customers. And the first thing Andrew wanted to do was just pick a customer. He didn't want the traditional drop-down menu where you have to scroll, but simply because he wanted to see his top customers at the top. So one of the very first thing we did was create a custom customer selector menu that showed him his top customers either at the individual level or at the group level. And then thing number 2, and then this allows you to then select this customer in a custom way. And then the other thing that we did was condense it down to fit on a laptop screen. I happen to work on a big TV. It's great. Big 4K monitors are fantastic for development, but for our customers who are working off laptop screens, that doesn't work. So we redesigned this to fit perfectly for a laptop screen. So all that information that was requiring a lot of scrolling is now buried in pop-out menus. So as Andrew's 3 questions of whys he talked about, you can almost think of those as 3 levels of pop-out. So pop-out number 1 answers his first question of why to do a drill down, and then clicking it again answers his next question of drilling down here. So all of this kind of custom development that's not native out of these visualization tools are some of the things that we built for him. And I love the opportunity to kind of show that off. We also have something else to show around board materials. So I know we haven't specifically started talking about that yet, but it might be an opportunity to do that. Jill, did you want to transition to that now?
Yeah. Before we go to the board piece, let's talk a minute on this kind of customer deep dive that you and Andrew are showcasing here. Andrew, what did you do before this was here? Yeah, right. What did life look like before? I mean, it clearly it looks like all the information's right here at your fingertips. You can use it in a customer meeting, in a sales meeting. What did you do before?
We have a relatively small team here, and so we used the existing financial data, and typically we're trying to stitch a lot of this together on the fly. I would start typically a week in advance and say, I'm about to go see this customer, right? We would do this long drill. We would deliver a series of spreadsheets. Nothing would be graphical or intuitive, and really try to get my arms around it. Oftentimes the challenge was we didn't have it wasn't like there was a process here. And so the next week we'd reinvent the wheel all over again. And then if I went back to that customer 2 months later, it's not like the information was auto updated. And so we would just constantly in this data exercise. And frankly, as it's human nature, we make a bunch of mistakes, right? Miscategorize, all these types of things. And you wouldn't notice in the way that it was delivered. One of the interesting things here was I mentioned how important the integrity of the data was, but it didn't stop us from creating the dashboard. What happens is if you start to have, apple, banana is my example, it sticks out like a sore thumb here. Something is, miscategorized in our financials, fat-fingered, something like that. These things start to become really apparent, right? All of a sudden I go, wow, my margin dropped by 20%. And you go in and not only are you finding places where maybe a mistake was made, but it might be a mistake that actually cost you money, right? So I actually found myself right out of the gate going back and going, guys, we didn't give the customer a price increase. Why are we charging them a higher price? This is a mistake. They didn't catch it on an invoice, and we got to go back and make it right. So it's a great question, and it was just a lot of work for our team, and with a much less beneficial result, frankly.
So in terms of, in terms of having access to this tool and kind of unifying your data, what's the after? I mean, you've talked a little bit about being able to use this, solving errors potentially, having good conversations with your customers. is it being used pretty widely across the team in terms of tools like this?
So this is the conversation we had about around kind of crawl, walk, run. You know, it's important. It was important to me. I was expecting to see some, you know, things that we didn't stitch together correctly. And so I originally opened it to a very small user group, folks who weren't going to get discouraged by the result. Also, people who had a little bit more a deep level understanding of the business to know what doesn't look right. And then as we created something, I felt comfortable to say this is one source of truth, right? We can rely on it. We opened that a little wider, right? To the extent that we're actually now there's a lot of work that's not in here. We're creating custom reports that are you know, helping with routines and rituals with my core team, customer service, purchasing, others, and I'm delivering them dashboards on either a daily basis at a specific time or, you know, other time periods to say, this is the first thing you do. You come in at 8 o'clock. I'm delivering you this dashboard at 8:30. It is going to highlight the top 5 people that we need to reach out to, right? These sales orders haven't come in on a regular basis. This gets me really interactive with the purchasing teams, the people who procure from us. And I think to Alan's point, it creates that customer journey. It enriches it for them, right? We become, rather than order takers, we become a value-added player. So I think it's important that you continue to push the information down, you know, and across the entire depth and breadth of your team. You got to just be smart about it and be careful not to go too fast because again, you know, that credibility can become a challenge.
Yeah, and the culture too you're talking about in terms of really embracing the data and using it. Brad, you mentioned another kind of example around using this information at the board level. So maybe you guys could share that example. So we kind of did a deep dive on the customer side, but data can be used in many ways. So why don't you share that piece?
So one of our first initiatives at Packline was to give Andrew his customer, exactly what we just talked about, the customer facing profile. And initiative number 2 was to give the ownership group of Packline visibility into how the business is running. So to show the starting point there, this is an example, this is a sample version of some of this board material that was being put together before. So you would have analysts going together, downloading data, putting together these type of reports in Excel. There was multi-page of instructions of how to go download all this data, and then this was done, you know, once a month or once a quarter manually. Then you go into the board meeting and walk away with this type of content. So our next initiative was to take this concept, all this data that was being previously manually pulled together, and put that together in interactive dashboards. So we have 3 that we can show today, actually 3 different workbooks, but each of those workbooks have different tabs. So I'll kind of click through these rather quickly and then turn it over to Andrew for a little bit of a story from his perspective. But basically, we have different tabs here that are showing that same data out of Excel. So this one is a suite of dashboards around just the top 10 customers. So just focused on top 10 customer sales, the variance in those sales, how are they doing previous year versus the current year. Each of those customers versus budget, and then viewing their rolling sales as well. So this is the same type of data, just shown different ways, and then showing that compared to budget. So how are they doing compared to budget, and then filling in the actual data as it comes in. So in this particular dashboard, it's looking at the current year. We have actual shown in orange, blues are showing the projected, and then as time progresses, this automatically gets updated. No needing to go and manually download this data into Excel anymore. Sorry. We have very similar content for the balance sheet, where it's taking that dashboard, taking that data, and then putting it all together in near real time. So this can be pulled up directly in a board meeting. Same thing here with building out with different metrics that are important for both the ownership group and the actual company, and in this example, Packline. So too many tabs to go through here, but Andrew, I'll turn it over to you, and as you're talking, I'll just kind of go through some of these.
Yeah. So I think to Brad's point, I mean, really focused on what did I need to drive the business, and then you go and you look at you've got a group of individuals in a board meeting, and we're looking for not just recounting what happened, right? This is we need to deliver the why. We need to be able to leverage the folks in the room, a lot of them incredible value add to the business, but you got 3-4 hours a month to go, be able to give an update. This is what's happening. Here's where we're at. Here's some challenges we're having. Here's some things we need help with. And so delivering that as concisely as you can is really difficult. Now, add to that all the preparation. Anybody who's done a board meeting knows that it takes a lot of time and effort and focus to get prepared to do that. And so, the goal here was let's reduce the heavy lifting going into a board meeting, and let's give some visibility to our constituents, the folks who sit in those meetings. We want to give them an opportunity whenever they want. They can go in and look at how we're doing. They can prepare in any way they see fit, get comfortable with the materials that we're going to provide. And these have become a replacement for your old-fashioned, PowerPoint slides, right? You notice that, you make changes as you prepare. Everything's real time. I don't have to keep moving back and forth and doing a bunch of work that, quite frankly, doesn't really add value for the team. So we brought that forward. And, all of the tools we brought to the board were higher level, right? Indication, right? But a lot of the breadcrumbs that I mentioned are there. The high level, the first why, it gets you there. Right now, the work that we do behind the scenes is, why 2, 3, and 4 to understand if you drill down, which we can, that information is there. So the preparation we're really doing comes down to, connecting the dots for the team, right? In terms of what we're seeing. This format, what Brad did, we did tabular approach. We're actually switching between our board deck and going straight into the data live. And if we really want to drill down, we'll oftentimes move straight from the board deck to what I showed you initially. Well, let me show you that client profile, right? If you really want, if we really want to get into the weeds, we can. We go right back to that information. We let the conversation take us where we want to go. So for me, this was huge, to making our board meetings really, really useful and meaningful, and coming away with takeaways that we needed, staying on topic. Again, we're leveraging the data and then overlaying a lot of the story, right? Which is the operational stuff that the data doesn't tell. So it's really enriched our board meetings. We've got a ways to go. I think this is just the first step for us, but
Andrew, how much time did this save in board prep?
Oh my, I would say, upwards of, it's probably in the 100 hours savings all in between all the team members that were part of building pieces of the board deck. The bigger thing for me is it's often crunch time. Board meetings, for some people become an afterthought, and you start to prepare a little late in the game. It's important to me that I can see these in advance, because all the the executive summary, those types of things, you can't really get there until you got what you need to go. This gives me all the time I need.
So you can do the analytics beforehand.
Yeah.
Before the
Rather
board meeting.
than, crunch time, midnight before, trying to figure out where we're at.
What was the board's reaction, Andrew, when you brought this for your board meeting?
Well, we did something kind of unconventional. I invited Brad to come. So he got a chance to see the board reaction real time. I think, kind of if you go board meeting without to the new format, it was just night and day. And I think everybody was really encouraged. We were more productive. And we also gave real-time feedback to Brad to say, hey, again, this is the power of the data, right? Hey, can we do a dashboard like this? Yes, certainly. Right now, everybody's involved in the conversation, and we're continuing to evolve together. So I think it was all overwhelmingly positive. And we're excited to continue that journey with our board, right? And Scenario as an intermediary.
That's great. Great. Alan, we've been talking about some stories specific to Packline and kind of the power of unifying data and having this single source of truth. From your experience, do you have any stories or examples that you might be able to share about some benefits that you've seen in your experience?
Well, excuse me. In dealing with a lot of private equity investors and their portfolio companies, there's a lot of M&A, mergers and acquisitions, carve-outs, roll-ups. And when you have those situations, you know, you either have to carve out or you have to integrate a lot of Salesforce instances, a lot of marketing automation instances, and the data, whether it's the prospect data or customer data, becomes a mess. And it takes a long time to do the integrations. And, you need to make data quality a thing. So you need to resource it with the right infrastructure, people, process, and technology. And that's often an issue that comes up with PE portfolio companies because of all the mergers and acquisitions and all the integrations they're doing and the roll-ups and the carve-outs. Data is a very, very important thing to get a handle on what's going on in the business and making the numbers talk. So I've seen this again and again as a need with portfolio companies of private equity firms as they try to get them to scale productively. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
And I can echo that. Salesforce, absolutely. Lived through that.
It can be a nightmare and take a lot longer than people think it's going to take.
Absolutely.
Yeah, kind of pulling that all as so everyone has the same source of data.
And the fields are consistent and mean that
critical.
They may be called the same thing, but mean something different from one company to another, and you've got to rectify all that stuff, which
Absolutely.
is non-trivial.
So let's talk a little bit about access. We talked about that as kind of one of the common misperceptions, kind of accessing the data. What are some challenges that you all have seen, that you have faced, kind of when you're you've made the decision, I want to adopt a data mindset. How can you overcome some of these challenges when people maybe aren't data experts? They don't really quite know. This could be very overwhelming in terms of kind of adopting this. So we've talked a little bit about some of that, but I'd love to dig into that a little bit more about the challenge that you've seen. Andrew, why don't we start with you, just in terms of kind of actually using all of this now?
Yeah, it's I think I liken it to just about anything, any big cultural change that you're going to have in a business. This is no different, right? So I think it's a question who's on first, who's going to own it. In my case, I come from a very, very small company is how I started my career. We lived in anecdote. We sat around a table and told stories all day, and we grew a good business that way. And then we sold that business. We professionalized and we started to understand the value of data. I was really fortunate to have some operational in manufacturing software that leveraged Tableau, and the light bulb came on for me. And then I went to the next business and took that forward and did the same. Really, at the time, went and leveraged in-house Microsoft Business Intelligence, and it was a great experience, albeit incredibly hard. So, in my case, I took ownership, and I had a deep belief, and I had seen what lives on the other side of implementation. So the biggest challenge you have is if there's nobody in the organization who understands what the finish line looks like, or has never seen the result of the value add, it's really a difficult experience. This is not easy. It's not for the faint at heart. And the reality was that if you don't have the belief and you don't have somebody that takes ownership, execution is going to be a nightmare, and adoption is going to be non-existent. It won't happen. And so, what I would argue is, if you're an owner of a business, look for those people who really see the benefit, maybe with the experience. Bring on people who have the experience. Bring on people who are excited and curious, people who are looking to either dispel or affirm anecdote. right? Understanding the value of those two things together. This is, this is the way to overcome it, right? But it's, at the end of the day, just like anything else, it takes a lot of conviction and a ton of hard work.
That makes sense. Alan, do you have anything to add kind of in terms of the driving that access and usage of data?
Not that much. Just, companies need to make data quality a thing. Make it a thing, resource it, and, oftentimes it's an afterthought, but if you really want to have clean data and have data as an asset to your business to help you grow productively, you have to resource the initiative. So, to Andrew's points, you have to assign someone that's going to be responsible for it. You have to give them the resources, and it has to be someone that has, excitement and enthusiasm for what as Andrew mentioned, what the other side, once you are successful, will bring your business. So, yeah, I'm probably agreeing more than anything else.
Well, and the shameless plug is, I sat with Brad the first time we met and just said, more than anything, in my mind, I see where I want to go, right? I understand what I want to understand. But just like when I was a kid and I tried to, draw a picture, I'm not a great artist, right? So I don't have, to your point, the fear is that I don't have the skill set. I'm not, this is not what I do for work. And so finding the right partner, somebody that can lean in alongside you and, like we did, and go, like this, not so much like this. How about like this? Well, I'm envisioning more like this. I don't know how many bad drawings I sent to Brad in the past 6 months, but this is the way to get out of the fear, is having somebody. And Brad was always like, yeah, no problem. We can figure that out. Yeah, sure. Let's iterate again. Right. This is right. Without that, I don't have any insights. We couldn't do it. So
It makes a lot of sense. So, as someone, what advice would you guys have if, a PE firm or a portfolio backed company, they're just they came to the realization like, yeah, we really should start to use data more intentionally and unify our data. What advice would you give them just starting out?
Is that one for me?
Oh, sorry. Andrew, why don't we go with you first?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, of course. Look, I think it's an extension of what I said before. There's 100 reasons why not. There are 1,000 priorities in a business, and if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. This is the reality. It's up to the leadership of a business to make things important, to prioritize them, and to do the work. So I think any sponsor, right, is sitting down and really getting aligned with your leadership team, saying this is a priority for us, this is a priority for our board. We have other portfolio companies or resources that can show you the way if you haven't been there, right? Leverage folks like Scenario. And then you have to be really, really committed to a culture change. In my world, in every case, I've been there when it didn't exist. But I've also seen it, and this is actually can be worse, where it existed and it didn't work, right? Similar to an ERP implementation or others, right? Is the worst, the hardest culture to overcome is one where they tried and failed, and getting everybody back on the beam. So, I think my one piece of advice is, if you want to do it, make it a priority, and not just make it a priority. This is what we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about it every board meeting. We're going to talk about it every monthly update, and we're going to keep pushing each other and challenging each other, to be better. If we want to learn what's on the other side, that's what you're going to have to do. And so, rather than just making a suggestion and being disappointed 6 months later, you really got to make it an initiative and make sure you got the right people around you who are willing to execute.
Yeah, as Alan was saying earlier, you got to make data a thing, right? Brad, do you have any advice that you would share?
Yeah, I would say the one thing I would hope our audience would do after today's conversation is evaluate their data processes and just ask, can this be easier? Can this be more efficient? If you find yourself wishing you could do something more with your data, we'd love to help. One of my favorite things to do is make data dreams come true. So we love just working with customers and overcoming challenges. So we have a self-service platform. We have some customers that do that, but what my personal favorite is to do is to step in on the more challenging things and work with customers like Andrew.
That makes sense. Alan, anything to add on the advice you would share?
Just agreeing with everything. I mean, it starts with a realization that if you don't have quality data, you're shooting in the dark. You're making decisions that could be wrong, that if you understood what was going on, you would make better decisions. And when you make better decisions, your customers are going to be happier and you're going to be driving more intelligent growth and productive growth. So again, make data a thing, resource it, get the right people, process technology. And as Andrew just said, make it a priority and review it at every board meeting and every management meeting that here's where we want to get to. And here's, and be cognizant of the investment it'll take, the time it'll take to get it right.
That sounds great. It looks like we have some, I thought we'd turn to some questions that we've gotten. So let me look at these. So one question, and this, Alan, this is for you. Have you seen any statistics from kind of the PE firm side, from investors, in terms of them evaluating companies that have consolidated tools higher? Do they view them as more valuable from an investor perspective? What have you seen related to that?
Before any private equity firm will invest in a company, they go through a due diligence process. And the due diligence process has a checklist of a lot of things they look at in each of the functions. It's not just financial results. They look at, customer revenue retention, and they will also look at the IT infrastructure and how what's the word, mature or immature it is, and how much investment they're going to have to make to get the company to scale better and to grow faster. And I would say that, the quality of data management and the infrastructure around that is one item on the checklist that I'm sure they'll look at, when they look at all the investment in technology that firms have and how much more they're going to have to do to help the organization scale. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another question. So if you are a believer, but perhaps others on your board or your ownership firm are maybe naysayers, what do you say to them, maybe to bring them along on your vision? And whether it's at the ownership level or the team level, to bring them along on this data journey. What should I start with? Why don't we start with you, Andrew, on advice for bringing the naysayers along?
So I think it's interesting because I've come across many in my time, and I think I've been one. I think my original experience was, running a business, and we were just stretched so thin, and we don't have time. We don't have time. And it was, the story I told myself, because, the same thing. I was afraid to invest. I think what I've been able to do in subsequent scenarios is do the work behind the scenes. Say, okay, you don't want to go big. Let's start small. Let's make a minimal investment here, and let me try to deliver something to make you a believer, right? You spend a few $1,000 on whatever every single, right? Look at your balance sheet, look at what you're spending your money on. Give me a little bit to go prove this out to you. And then, at that point, you slowly turn the tide. And sometimes it's affirmational, like I discussed, which is, I'm not trying to prove you wrong. It's not me against you. It's not data against intuition. Sometimes it's, hey, this is the way I think about them. But you go, well, this is really interesting because that's exactly what we're seeing in the information. And they go, I know, I'm so smart. I told you. I don't need the data. That's great. And isn't it nice to see that it's taking you where we thought it want to go? This is kind of call it the art of the transition with those naysayers. I think if you can, slowly walk them into a position, they wake up 6 months, a year later, and they realize that they become believers, and they didn't intend to.
That's great. Brad, you have any thoughts on how to bring the naysayers along?
It's hard to top Andrew's answer. I mean, I feel like most of this conversation has just been Alan and I agreeing with Andrew.
Okay, and Alan,
data first has to pass the smell test, and when it passes the smell test to those folks that work with gut and intuition, and they see that the data is confirming, but maybe they're surprised at some things and they learn something that can help. But as with any change management initiative, you have to have a vision, you have to know where you're going, you have to have a target, you have to understand resources, and you have to get people to come along with you. And you have to have advocates. You've got to have advocates, and you may have some naysayers, and you have to have a way of dealing with that, and you have to over communicate, and leadership is really important. I mean, this webinar isn't about change management, but we could have a whole other conversation about that as well. It's takes time, but it's important work to be done.
Absolutely. So it looks like we covered all of our questions. Panelists, any last thoughts before we wrap up that you'd like to share? Anything that we want to emphasize one more time? Andrew or Brad, anyone hop in?
I would just like to say, thank Andrew and Alan for joining us. And, as I mentioned earlier, Scenario is here to help. So if anyone here would like assistance with their data needs, whether it's self-service or full service, we're here to help.
Absolutely. A few phrases I really loved today was, you got to make data a thing. And then Andrew was talking about informed intuition, which I think is a great thought in terms of informing your gut, so you're making good decisions. And then Brad is making data dreams come true. So everyone's got their piece there. So I think those are some great things to keep in mind. Whether you are just beginning the data journey, you're convincing the naysayers, or you're kind of figuring out, well, what's next in terms of my steps. So I do echo Brad. Thank you so much for our panelists, Alan, Andrew, Brad, and then also to all of our attendees today. We really appreciate. I know it's always busy to join a webinar, so we really appreciate you taking your time to join this meeting. We will be sharing the recording of the webinar afterwards via email, so that you can listen back to all this great advice that we've heard. If you would like to hear more about Scenario and our white glove data managed service, please reach out to us, visit our website, and obviously the information will be in the email. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for our panelists. We will see you next time. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.